Lake District, England. Popular holiday destination in the north of England, famous for its lakes, forests, mountains and natural beauty. The Lake District is associated with poets such as William Wordsworth, author Beatrice Potter and art critic John Ruskin. Listen to the hometown murders of the June 2010 Cumbrian shooting spree, Carol Ann Park and the Lady in the Lake trial, and the honour killing of Sheffield Ahmed. The first hometown murders case we're looking at today is the Cumbrian shooting spree of 2010. It occurred on the 2nd of June when a lone gunman, taxi driver Derrick Bird, killed 12 people and injured 11 others before killing himself in Cumbria, England. Along with the 1987 Uncovered massacre and the 89 Monk Seaton shootings, the 1996 Dunblane School massacre, this is one of the worst criminal acts involving firearms in British history. The shootings ended when Bird was found dead in a wooded area after abandoning his car in the village of Boot. The shootings began mid-morning in Lumprey and moved to Fitzgibbon, Whitehaven, Gurmont, Gosforth and Seascale, sparking a major manhunt by the Cumbrian Constabulary with assistance from civil nuclear constabulary officers. 30 crime scenes were investigated. Queen Elizabeth II paid tribute to the victims, and Prince Wales later visited Whitehaven in the wake of the tragedy. The Prime Minister David Cameron and the Home Secretary Theresa May also visited West Cumbria. A memorial fund was set up to aid the victims and affected communities. In the early hours of the 2nd of June, Bird left his home in Rora and drove his Citroen Zara Picasso to his twin brother David's house in Lampelow and shot him 11 times in the head and body with a .22 caliber rifle, killing him. He then went to Fitzgibbon, arriving at the family home of solicitor Kevin Commons, whom Bird had prevented from driving away by firing twice with a double-barreled shotgun, hitting Commons once in the shoulder. Commons staggered out of his car and onto the entrance to his farmyard, where Bird killed him with 2 rifle shots to the head. At 10:20 a.m, the police were telephoned. Bird then moved towards Whitehaven. A witness called the Cumbria Constabulary to report the Commons shooting, although her call was delayed by several minutes after she was asked by neighbours what she should do. She also erroneously described Bird as being armed with an air rifle, despite being able to hear the gunshots. After killing Commons, Bird went to a friend's residence to retrieve a shotgun he had loaned, although when he answered by his friend's wife, who didn't have access to it. Afterwards, at 10:33, Bird drove to a taxi rank on Duke Street, Whitehaven. There he called over Darren Rewcastle, another taxi driver who had previously known Bird. Bird had conflicts with Rewcastle over his behaviour, his practice of poaching fares, and an incident where Rewcastle damaged the tyres on Bird's taxi and openly boasted about it. When Rewcastle approached Bird's taxi, Bird shot him twice at point-blank range, with the rifle hitting him in the lower face, chest and abdomen. Rewcastle died of his injuries, becoming the only person to die in Whitehaven due to these attacks. Soon afterwards, killing Rewcastle, drove alongside another taxi driver, Donald Reed, and shot him in the back, wounding him. Bird then made a loop back to the taxi rank and fired twice at Reed as he waited for emergency personnel, missing him. Next, Bird drove away from the taxi rank, stopped alongside another taxi driver, Paul Wilson, as he walked down Scott Street, called him over to his vehicle as he did, like with Rewcastle. When Wilson answered his call, Bird shot him in the right side of his face with the shotgun, severely wounding him. As a result of the shootings, unarmed officers at the local police station were informed and began following Bird's taxi as it drove onto Couch Road. There, Bird fired his shotgun at a passing taxi, injuring the male driver, Terry Kennedy, and the female passenger, Emma Purcell. Bird was then able to flee the officers after he aimed his shotgun at two of them, forcing them to take cover. However, he did not fire. He instead took advantage of the unarmed officer's distraction and escaped. In the wake of the Whitehaven shootings, residents there and in the neighbouring towns of Urmont and Seascale were urged to stay indoors. A massive manhunt for Bird was launched by the Cumbrian Constabulary, which was assisted by civil nuclear constabulary officers. Bird proceeded to drive through several local towns, firing apparently at random and calling a majority of the victims over to his taxi before shooting them. Near Egremont, Bird tried to shoot Jacqueline Williamson as she walked her dog, but she managed to escape without injury. Upon arriving, he stopped alongside Susan Hughes as he walked home from the shooting and shot her in the chest and abdomen with a shotgun. He then got out of his taxi and got into a struggle with her before fatally shooting her in the back of the head with his rifle. Then, after driving a short distance onto Bridge End, Bird fired the shotgun at Kenneth Fishburne as he walked in the opposite direction. Fishburne suffered fatal wounds to the head and chest. This was followed by the shooting of Leslie Hunter, who was called over to Bird's taxi before being shot in the face at close range with the shotgun. Then a second time in the back after he turned away to protect himself. Hunter survived his injuries. Bird then went south towards Thornhill, where he fired his gun at Ashley Glaister, a teenage girl. However, he missed her. He then passed Carlington, travelled on to the village of Wilton, where he tried to visit Jason Carvey, a member of the diving club Bird belonged to, but Bird left with Carvey's wife came to the door. Soon afterwards, Bird shot Jennifer Jackson once in the chest with his shotgun and twice in the head with a rifle, killing her. Bird then drove past Town Head Farm, but turned back towards it, fired his shotgun, fatally hitting Jackson's husband, James, in the head and wounding a woman named Christine Hunter Hall in the back. He then drove back to Carlton and killed Isaac Dixon, a mole catcher who was talking to a farmer in the field, where he was fatally shot twice at close range by Bird's shotgun. A former semi-professional rugby player, Gary Purdon, was soon shot and killed while working in a field opposite Red Admiral Hotel at Boonwood near Gosforth. Bird then drove towards Seascale. Along the way, he began driving slowly and waved other motorists past him. He shot a motorist named Jamie Clark, who died of a shotgun wound to the head, although it was not clear at first whether he died from the shotgun wound or the subsequent car crash. Bird then encountered another motorist named Henry Berger, a narrow one-way passage underneath a railway bridge. When Berger allowed Bird to enter first, Bird fired at him as he passed by, shooting him twice and causing severe injury to his right arm. 3 armed response vehicles attempting to pursue Bird was later blocked out of the tunnel by Berger's vehicle. It had to be pushed away to let them pass. Meanwhile, Bird had driven to Drigg Road, where he fired twice at Michael Pike, a retired man who was cycling in front of him. The first shot missed, but second hit Pike in the head and killed him. Seconds later, while on the same street, Bird fatally shot Jane Robinson in the neck and head with his shotgun at point-blank range after apparently calling her over. After the killing of Robinson, who was the last fatality in the shooting, witnesses described Bird as driving increasingly erratically down the street. At 11:33, Police Constabulary Philip Lewis and Andrew Leverstack spotted Bird as his car passed their vehicle. They attempted to pursue him, but were delayed in roadworks and lost sight of him a minute later. Soon afterwards, Bird drove into Irksdale Valley, where he wounded Jackie Lewis in the neck with his rifle as she was out walking. At this point, his route had become clearer to the police during their search for him. Next, Bird stopped alongside Fiona Moretta, who leaned into his passenger window, believing he was going to ask her for directions. Instead, he injured it in the chest with a rifle, then continued onwards towards the village of Boot. Bird arrived, briefly stopping at a business premises called Sims Travel, and fired his rifle at nearby people but missed. Continuing further into the village, he continued firing at random people and missing. Bird eventually fired his rifle at 2 men, hitting and severely wounding Nathan Jones in the face. He was shortly followed by a couple who'd stopped their car to take a photo. Samantha Christie suffered severe wounds to the face from a rifle bullet. Christie's partner, Craig Ross, fled upon Christie's instruction and was then fired at but escaped uninjured. Shortly after firing onto 2 cyclists, Bird crashed his taxi into several vehicles and a stone wall, damaged a tyre. Briefly continuing onward, he abandoned the car at a beauty spot near Boot called Dr. Bridge, where the damaged tyre deflated. A nearby family of 4 who was unaware of the shootings offered assistance to Bird but were quickly turned down and advised to leave. He moved the rifle from the taxi and walked over a bridge leading into Oak Moe Hill Woods. Bird was last seen at 12:30. Shortly after 12:30, police confirmed that there had been fatalities and that they were searching for a suspect. Police later announced they were searching for the driver of a dark grey Citroen Zara Picasso, driven by the suspect, who was identified as Bird. At around 12:36, armed police officers and dog handlers arrived at the scene of Bird's abandoned taxi and began a search in and around the wooded area. At 2 p.m, Deputy Chief Constable Stuart Hyde announced that Bird's body had been found in a wooded area along with a rifle. Police confirmed shortly afterwards that members of the public had taken shelter, driving the incident could now resume their normal activities. During the manhunt, the gates of the nearby Sellafield nuclear reprocessing plant were closed as a precaution, and the afternoon shift was told not to come to work. This was the first lockdown in the history of the plant. Derrick Bird was born to Joseph and Mary Bird, his twin brother David and an older brother. He lived alone in Rora and had 2 sons with a woman whom he separated in the mid-90s. He became a grandfather in May 2010 and was described as a quite popular man who worked as a self-employed taxi driver in Whitehaven. In 2007, Bird was beaten unconscious by 4 men who tried to run instead of paying him for his taxi services. Friends said he changed after the attack. It was reported that he previously sought help from a local hospital due to his fragile mental state, although these reports were unconfirmed. Bird held a shotgun certificate since 1974 and had it renewed several times, most recently in 2005, and held firearms certificates for a rifle in 2007 onwards. He was being investigated by HM Revenue and Customs. Bird's body was formally identified at Furness General Hospital in Barrow-in-Furness and was later cremated at a private service on the 18th of June 2010. There has been speculation that Bird may have had a grudge against people associated with Sellafield Nuclear Power Plant, that he worked for a joiner, resigning in 1990 due to alleged theft of wood from the plant. He subsequently convicted and given a 12-month suspended sentence. 3 of the dead were former employees, although there was no evidence they were involved with his resignation. Terry Kennedy, a fellow taxi driver who also describes himself as one of Bird's best friends, was wounded by Bird, has claimed that Bird had a relationship with a Thai girl he met on holiday in Pattaya, Thailand. He had further claimed by another friend of Bird that he sent £1,000 to the girl, who subsequently ended their relationship via text message. He added that Bird had been made a fool of. It had been speculated that Bird had been involved with a family dispute over his father's will. The speculation was heightened when it revealed that Bird had targeted both his twin David and family solicitor Kevin Commons in the attack, killing both. Police investigated the killings have also found that Bird was subject to an ongoing tax investigation by HM Revenue and Customs for tax evasion and the threat of possible future prosecution and punishment might have contributed to his action. According to Mark Cooper, a fellow taxi driver who had been known for 15 years, Bird had accumulated £60,000 in a secret bank account and worried that he would be sent to prison for hiding the cash from HM Revenue and Customs. He reportedly believed his brother and the solicitor was conspiring to send him to prison for a tax evasion. In the 3 days before the killings, Bird called his brother 44 times. The second hometown murders case we're looking at is the Lady in the Lake trial. It was the 2005 murder case in which Gordon Park, born 25th of January 1944, a retired teacher from Leach near Barrow-in-Furness, Cumbria, was jailed for life for the 1976 murder of his first wife, Carol Ann Park. Carol Park went missing on the 17th of July 1976 and was never seen alive again by her family. In 1997, her body was discovered by divers in Coniston Water and Gordon Park was arrested on suspicion of murder. Reputedly, he said, "Oh dear," after being informed they had found her body. The charges were subsequently dropped, but in 2004, Park was arrested again and found guilty of his wife's murder. The trial's judge sentenced him to life imprisonment and recommended he serve a minimum of 15 years before being considered for parole. He was held at Garth Prison, Leyland, Preston. In December 2007, he lodged an appeal against his conviction, which was dismissed in November 2008. On to 25th of January 2010, he was found hanged in his cell and pronounced dead at the scene. The details of the murder are sketchy. Carol was killed by blunt trauma to her face by means of some instrument alleged in court to have been an ice axe. She was then bound with rope using complex knots, weighed down with rocks and lead pipes, and thrown overboard from a boat on Coniston Water. The body landed on an underwater ledge where it was later found by amateur divers. Had it been dropped a few metres further from the shore, it would have sunk to the much deeper bottom and probably never been discovered. There was a greater deal of controversy surrounding the case. Park received much support from his family and friends and maintained his innocence. There was a large amount of local interest in the trial, as shown by the sales of local paper, the North West Evening Mail. Some claimed that much of the evidence against him could have been discounted, and there were vergers and petitions in attempts to free Park from prison and clear his name. Prior to her disappearance, Carol Park, according to her friends, was feeling depressed. She was talked of tracing her biological parents as she was adopted. On 17th of July 1976, she went missing. Gordon claimed she had left home for another man, and Carol left their home in Leith twice before. It was for this reason Gordon claimed that he did not report her missing for 6 weeks. Carol was said to time her periods away from home to coincide with school holidays. Gordon claimed that it wasn't until she didn't return in time to take her job up as a primary school teacher in September that he realised there had been a problem. At this time, he reported her missing via his solicitor, and her family was informed. On the day she vanished, the family had been due to visit Blackpool on a day trip. However, Carol said she felt unwell and wanted to remain behind in bed. She had never seen alive again by her family. Gordon claimed he returned home to find Carol had left the house, leaving behind her wedding ring, and there was no sign of a struggle. A missing persons inquiry was launched, but nothing came of it. This missing persons report was subsequently lost, and it was implied by some that it was because both Gordon and a senior police commander, who by the time the article was published had died, involved in the case were Freemasons. This was rebutted by Sandra Lyon, who in No Smoke claimed that Gordon had never been a Freemason. At the time, police told Gordon that should a body be found, he would be the main suspect. On 13th of August 1997, amateur divers discovered Park's body, clad in only a nightdress, 75 feet down at the bottom of Coniston Water. She was nicknamed Lady of the Lake by detectives after the 1943 detective novel by Raymond Chandler, The Lady in the Lake. The body had been wrapped in a pinafore dress, a canvas rucksack and plastic bags, tied with several knots and weighed down with lead piping. Her eyes had been covered by plasters. It was later reported that the body had landed on an underwater ledge and had been thrown into the water a few metres further from the land. It would probably never have been found. Details of Carol's death was revealed in the post-mortem. There were several injuries to the skull, and it was said that her face had been smashed by multiple blows. It was later found in court that the murder weapon had been an ice axe. The body was found to be in a fetal position, which suggested the body had been dealt with within a few hours of her death before rigor mortis could settle in. It had since been said that investigators failed to acknowledge that rigor mortis passes in 20 to 48 hour period, and that body could feasibly have been trussed once rigor mortis had passed. Many unusual knots were used to tie the body, and the same knots were said to be used in Gordon Park's house and boat. This was one of the key pieces of evidence used against Gordon in the trial. At the time of the discovery of the body, Gordon and his third wife Jenny was on a cycling holiday in France. They heard news of the discovery of the body and were said to have seen footage of the police search in their house. On the 24th of August, they arrived home and Gordon was arrested on suspicion of murder at 8 a.m. the next morning. He was charged with the murder of Carol Parker and remanded in Preston prison. 2 weeks later, solicitors managed to persuade the court to grant him bail. On the 6th of January 1998, the charges against Gordon was dropped due to lack of evidence. After the charges were dropped, Gordon said that he wished to try to put this all, including the events of the 21 years ago, behind me and try to return to my everyday life, end quote. However, the fact that his charges were dropped angered Carol's brother Ivor Price, who said that he was disgusted by the way that Carol was portrayed in the proceedings, and talked of how Carol was not, quote, someone who was cheap or had a string of lovers, end quote. Gordon was again arrested on 13th of January 2004. Police said at the time the murder file had never been closed, and the arrest followed new leads. These new leads were later to be a confession by Michael Wainwright, who claimed to have been a cellmate of Gordon's during their short prison stay in 1997. The police then revisited the site where the body was discovered and found a piece of Westmoreland green slate, a stone that matched the rocks that made up the wall of the family bungalow. The case was brought to trial at Manchester Crown Court and lasted 10 weeks. There was no single piece of evidence that pointed to Gordon indisputably, but the prosecution argued that when the evidence was placed together, it could only point at Park and not a mysterious stranger or secret lover. Primarily, the case for the prosecution rested on circumstantial evidence, with the jury being asked to consider knots, rocks used to weigh down her body, the ice axe, and all linking Gordon Park to the crime. However, statements of Michael Wainwright and another of Gordon's cellmates who had learning difficulties had also been used as evidence by the prosecution. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and was told that he would at least have to serve 15 years. The judge said that he had taken into account the terrible concealment of the body. Park claimed he and his wife had an open marriage. On the 25th of January 2010, the following morning of Park's 66th birthday, he was found hanged and unconscious in a prison cell in Garth Prison and pronounced dead at the scene later in the morning. It was believed that a ligature was involved and that Park inflicted the injuries upon himself. Park had not been assessed for the risk of suicide. His son, Jeremy Park, said that, quote, were all completely devastated and still believed he's innocent 100%, end quote. Since his death, Carol Park's family had tried to trace her ashes. And the last case we're looking at for hometown murders is the murder of Sheffield Ahmed, a 17-year-old British Pakistani girl from Great Sankey, Warrington, Cheshire. She was murdered by her parents in a suspected so-called honour killing in September 2003 due to their daughter being too westernised. Her parents, Iftikhar and Faranza Ahmed, were each subsequently imprisoned for a minimum of 25 years for their daughter's murder in August 2012. The possibility of other individuals having helped Shafilea's parents to dispose of their daughter's body had been raised. After the parents' trial, the chief executive of Bradford Council for Mosque encouraged anybody with information about the case to come forward with information to assist the police. Shafilea Ahmed was born in Bradford, West Yorkshire, to Pakistani parents. Her family, of the Sunni branch of Islam and native Punjabi speakers, originated from the village of Uttam, located in the Gujarat district. She resided in the Great Sankey community in Warrington. She had the nickname of Shaf. She later attended Great Sankey High School, including its sixth form centre, Barrow Hall College, and from 3rd of September 2013, Priestley College. She was an A-level student who hoped to become a solicitor. During trips to Pakistan earlier in 2003, Shafilea swallowed bleach in what was later reported to be a suicide attempt. Her father claimed, however, that this instance had been a simple mistake. He contested she had drunk the solution during the occurrence of a power cut, thinking it was a bottle of fruit juice. Shafilea suffered extensive damage to her throat, for which she had had regular ongoing care at the time of her disappearance. According to media reports, Shafilea turned down a suitor in a forced marriage during this trip, although her parents denied that any attempts made to pressure her into agreeing to the prospective marriage. Shafilea disappeared on the 11th of September 2003 and had been missing for a week before her teachers informed the police. Subsequently, there was a major campaign to urge people who had any information to come forward. Actress Shabna Galati fronted the media campaign and read some of her poems on television. A nationwide hunt was launched, but when Shafilea failed to seek treatment for a damaged throat, detectives became convinced she had been murdered, possibly in an honour killing connected with her rejection of her Pakistani suitor. Superintendent Geraint Jones told the Mirror, quote, "Her family say a suitor had been found for her in Pakistan, but she was free to make her own decisions," end quote. In February 2004, Ahmed's corpse was found in the River Kent near Sedgwick, Cumbria, proximally to Kendal in the Lake District, 70 miles away from Warrington. After heavy flooding in the area, police said that the corpse was deliberately hidden. A gold zigzag bracelet and a blue topaz ring found with the body were identified by her parents. Due to extensive decomposition of her remains, the cause of death could not be determined by the coroner at post-mortem, leaving the police to believe that it had probably been there since the day she disappeared or not long after. Shafilea's body was also found to have been dismembered. A femur was found. Detective Sergeant Mike Foster stated at a hearing, quote, "The pathologist could not determine the cause of death, but did say that the body was that of a young female. Obviously, because of the condition of the body, she was unable to give any further findings," end quote. A second post-mortem was ordered by South Lakeland coroner Cyril Pickett, but failed to add anything further. Inspector Mike Forrester, a Cumbria constabulary, at the inquest hearing stated, quote, "It was unclear whether all Shafila's body parts had been found," end quote. He went on to state that DNA tests on the right thigh bone of the body found at the east bank of the River Kent made it a 1 in a billion chance that the remains were those of anyone other than Shafilea. The lower jaw of the body found was also shown to Shafilea's dentist, who said he was 90% sure it was hers after examining dental work that had been carried out of it. Her parents Sheffield Ahmed, a taxi driver, and Farzana Ahmed were released without charge after briefly having been arrested, along with 5 other members of her extended family. There were several poems written by her that interested the police in their investigations, notably I Feel Trapped. The poem is said to reflect Shafilea's utter despair and emotional state, describing a hopeless life, a family that ignored her, and that she'd run away from home several times in the past due to tensions with her family. A friend named Sarah Bennett would later recollect that on one occasion Shafilea had been branded a slut by her mother for simply choosing to dye her hair and wear false nails. She had been reported missing twice before and been found staying with friends, said a neighbour, Sheila Costello. Quote, "We heard that they had an argument over an arranged forced marriage and that Shafi had run away. I hope nothing terrible had happened to her." End quote. Cheshire Constabulary investigated the murder of Shafilea and after 3 years had not established a suspect, although 8 members of extended family were arrested on suspicion of conspiracies to prevent the course of justice. In relation to the case, proceedings against them were later dropped. It was later reported that unidentified human hair, not from members of her immediate family, was found at Shafilea's foot. There is still confusion regarding the exact extent of the trip she made to Pakistan. In January 2008, the coroner's inquest held that Shafilea was the victim of, quote, a very vile murder, having taken from her home. The verdict was unlawfully killing. End quote. Shafilea's family left the inquest without making any comment. After the inquest, Shafilea's parents attempted unsuccessfully to have the verdict of unlawful killing overturned and replaced by an open verdict. It was argued the coroner's view by her father was biased. Ahmed's younger sister, Alicia, arranged a robbery that took place at her parents' house on the 25th of August 2010, during which she, her brother, sisters and parents were in the house. She was arrested and told police that her parents had killed Shafilea. She told them that after trying to force the girl to accept the arranged marriage, they were afraid her refusal would bring shame on her family. Her father put a plastic bag into her mouth and suffocated her to death. On the 7th of September 2011, Cheshire Police announced that Shafilea's parents, Iftikhar Ahmed, 51, and Farzana Ahmed, 48, of Liverpool Road, Warrington, had been charged with her murder. Their trial began in May 2012, and on the 3rd of August, they were both found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years. Evans stated, quote, an expectation that she lived in a concealed cultural environment separated from the culture of the country in which she lived were unrealistic, destructive and cruel. End quote. After the trial, police were said to be looking into the possibility that Shafilea's parents may have helped when they dumped her body in the 2003, and they were looking to a new information revealed during the trial. In August 2012, Chief Executive of Bradford Council for Mosque encouraged anybody knowing about the case to come forward and said the help would help the group and this would help the police.